2. Samuel became the sort of college student who in the early 90s drove tandems and coaches and tally-hoes between Princeton and Yale and New York City to show they appreciated the social importance of football games. He believed passionately in good form. His choosing of gloves, his tying of ties, his holding of reins were imitated by impressionable freshmen. Outside of his own set, he was considered rather a snob, but in his set he was the set. It never worried him. He played football in the autumn, drank highballs in the winter, and rode in the spring. Samuel despised all those who were merely sportsmen without being gentlemen, or merely gentlemen without being sportsmen. He lived in New York, and often brought home several of his friends for the weekend. Those were the days of the horse car, and in case of a crush it was, of course, the proper thing for anyone of Samuel's set to rise and deliver his seat to a standing lady with a formal bow. One night in Samuel's junior year, he boarded a car with 2 of his intimates. There were 3 vacant seats. When Samuel sat down, he noticed a heavy-eyed laboring man sitting next to him, who smelt objectionably of garlic. Sagging slightly against Samuel, and spreading a little as a tired man will, took up quite too much room. The car had gone several blocks when it stopped for a quartet of young girls, and of course the 3 men of the world sprang to their feet and proffered their seats with due observance of form. Unfortunately, the laborer, being unacquainted with the code of neckties and tally-hos, failed to follow their example, and one of the young lady was left at an embarrassed stance. 14 eyes glared reproachfully at the barbarian. 7 lips curled slightly, but the object of scorn stared stolidly into the foreground in sturdy unconsciousness of his despicable conduct. Samuel was the most violently affected. He was humiliated that any male should so conduct himself. He spoke aloud. "There's a lady standing," he said sternly. That should have been quite enough, but the object of scorn only looked up blankly. The standing girl tittered and exchanged nervous glances with her companions, but Samuel was aroused. "There's a lady standing," he repeated, rather raspingly. The man seemed to comprehend. "I pay my fare," he said quietly. Samuel turned red, and his hands clenched, but the conductor was looking their way, so at a warning nod from his friends, he subsided into sullen gloom. They reached their destination and left the car, but so did the laborer, who followed them, swinging his little pail. Seeing his chance, Samuel no longer resisted his aristocratic inclination. He turned around and, launching a full-featured dime novel sneer, made a loud remark about the right of lower animals to ride with human beings. In a half-second, the workman had dropped his pail and let fly at him. Unprepared, Samuel took the blow neatly on the jaw and sprawled full length into the cobblestone gutter. "Don't laugh at me," cried his assailant. "I've been working all day. I'm tired as hell." As he spoke, the sudden anger died out of his eyes, and the mask of weariness dropped again over his face. He turned and picked up his pail. Samuel's friends took a quick step in his direction. "Wait!" Samuel had risen slowly and was motioning back. Sometime, somewhere, he had been struck like that before. Then he remembered Gilly Hood. In the silence, as he dusted himself off, the whole scene in the room at Andover was before his eyes, and he knew intuitively that he had been wrong again. This man's strength, his rest, was the protection of his family. He had more use for his seat in the streetcar than any young girl. "It's all right," said Samuel gruffly. "Don't touch him. I've been a damn fool." Of course, it took more than an hour or a week for Samuel to rearrange his ideas on the essential importance of good form. At first, he simply admitted that his wrongness had made him powerless, as it had made him powerless against Gilly. But eventually his mistake about the workman influenced his entire attitude. Snobbishness is, after all, merely good breeding grown dictatorial. So Samuel's code remained, but the necessity of imposing it upon others had faded out in a certain gutter. Within that year his class had somehow stopped referring to him as a snob.